Hello, and welcome back for our next unit, Reflections of Democracy. In the wake of the Revolutionary War, a small new country was officially recognized. The Americans had won with the help of the French, but now they were truly on their own for the first time since 1608 when the first colonists landed at Jamestown. Great Britain withdrew its military and all of its financial resources. America was left with those who had sided with the Patriots and their natural resources. What they didn't have and desperately needed was a functioning government. This would be the first test for the young nation and would determine whether or not America would survive on its own. Today's focus will be on identifying the ideas that Americans felt were important to include in the framework of their new government. Our learning targets for this lesson are the following. I can identify the ideas important to the Virginia Declaration of Rights written by George Mason, and I can identify the ideas important to the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom written by Thomas Jefferson. Creating a brand new government would be a two-part task. First, each of the former colonies had to reestablish their own state government. Previously, each colony had a governor who was appointed by the king. They did have representative lawmaking bodies before, like the Virginia House of Burgesses, but the laws that were made were influenced by Great Britain. Much of these changes took place during the Revolution, as the Patriots were no longer abiding by the laws of Great Britain, but each new state had to adopt its own constitution. A constitution is simply a document laying out the function of the government and the rights that citizens have. Secondly, and most importantly for America, the former colonies needed to develop and agree to a national government to take the place of the king and parliament. This sounds like a simple task, right? After all, they'd just spent 8 years fighting against political ideologies they didn't agree with. That's where Americans started, with eliminating what they didn't want. Examples of this include a constitutional monarchy, like Great Britain's, a lack of representation in the lawmaking process, and a national religion. Easy peasy. The hard part would be agreeing on what they did want their new government to look like. After all, this was their one shot at creating the country they so desperately wanted. In Virginia, they began recreating their government years before the end of the Revolution. By the end, they had a new state constitution, which included two important documents that would later influence the U.S. Constitution, the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom and the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Let's take a look at those. Thomas Jefferson, who we know for writing the Declaration of Independence, also wrote a document which supported religious freedom for Virginians. Going back to the creation of the colonies, several in New England and Pennsylvania were founded by people of Christian faiths other than the official Church of England. In Great Britain, they were persecuted for not following the nation's official faith. Over the years, the idea of being able to practice any faith grew more popular, but the king still would not allow it. Jefferson's Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom gave all Virginians the right to choose their own faith. The second document, which was actually written before the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, included multiple rights for Virginians. George Mason, another famous Virginian, is credited with writing the Virginia Declaration of Rights. In it, among other ideas, he stated that all Virginians have the right to freedom of religion and freedom of the press, which is another word for newspaper. He wrote about equality and rejected the idea that wealthy people were naturally better than others because of their privileged lifestyles. He also rejected the notion of inheriting political power like a king does. His ideas were used by Jefferson when writing the Declaration of Independence and would inspire the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution a decade later. In the next lesson, we will explore the second part in creating a new government, the national government. For today, though, take a moment to reflect on the following questions so that you're ready for what comes next. Number 1, what is the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom and who wrote it? Number 2, what is the Virginia Declaration of Rights and who wrote it?